Hi everybody, and welcome to Graphing Slope-Intercept Form. Graphing slope-intercept form is a key concept in algebra, so please make sure that you have your pencils and your notebooks out and you are ready to go, because as I like to say, these skills come back to haunt you, and graphing slope-intercept form is definitely something you are going to have to use later in this class. First off, what is slope-intercept form? Slope-intercept form is a way to graph a linear line. And if you remember from our last class, a linear line is a straight line. So we can represent that straight line in the equation y equals mx plus b. This is slope-intercept form. M represents slope, and B represents the y-intercept. Slope. It is the process to get from one point on the line to another. So they're directions in order to create dots that make up this line. So if we take a look at this dot right here, this will be our starting point. In order to get to the new dot on this line, we're going to look at the slope. Slope is the directions, as I said before, to get from one to the other, one point to the other. To get from this point to this point, I went right one line, then up two lines. That's slope. They're directions. The way that we write slope, though, is by first writing the amount of squares it takes to go either up or down. If it's a positive slope, then you're going to have a positive number. So here we went up 2 squares. That means we have a positive 2. The bottom number represents the amount of squares we went to the right. And right here, you can see that we went right 1. So that creates a slope of 2 over 1. Now there are many different types of slope, 4 to be exact. First is a positive slope. The way I like to think of this is going uphill. A positive slope has a positive number on top and a positive number on bottom. So that means that our line is going up and then to the right. A negative slope has a negative in front of the fraction. So that means that we're going to have a slope or a downwards motion and then going to the right. So you can think of this as going downhill. The next type of slope is the slope of 0. That is a straight horizontal line. It does not go up, it does not go down, it just continues to go in a straight line. Whenever you see this, this will be represented as 0. Now that last and final one is a vertical slope. This is called undefined. Undefined slope is when you have a line that goes straight up and down. It doesn't go right or left. Next, we come to the y-intercept. The y-intercept is the point where the line crosses the y-intercept. Fun fact right there. So looking at the y-axis, we have our line, that linear line that we have created on this graph, crossing at 1. Now it's very, very, very important to remember the y-intercept. Why? It needs to cross on the y-axis. It's not where the line crosses on the x-axis. A lot of people get that mixed up. So look at the y. This y-intercept is going to be the number 1. That is because our line crosses at 1 on the y-axis. Now let's put it all together. So if you are creating the equation y equals mx plus b, you're going to find the slope right in front of x. In this case, I have the slope of 1/2. 1/2 means that my slope obviously is a half, but particularly it means up 1 and right 2. Remember that first number means whether you go up or down. Since this 1 is a positive, that means that I'm going to go up 1. That bottom number in a fraction means that I'm going to go to the right, and I'm going to the right 2. All slopes should be in the form of a fraction. If they are not in the form of a fraction, we will see an example of that later, but you just need to put the number 1 underneath. Next, we're going to move on to our y-intercept. Our y-intercept is located at the end of the slope-intercept equation, and this is your starting point. So this means you're going to start at -2 on the y-axis in order to start creating your line. Now let's see this in action. So if I were to create the line y equals 3x minus 1, this is what my line would create. What I would do if I didn't have a fancy calculator app to do it for me is I would first start at -1. -1 on the y-axis is my starting point. Again, that's the y-intercept. Then I'm going to take a look at my slope. That slope is 3. Since it is not a fraction, I can make it a fraction by putting 3/1. So that means that I'm going to start at my y-intercept. I am going to go up 1, 2, 3 spaces, and then right 1. And as you can see, that point is exactly on that line. So I would do that again. Up 1, 2, 3, right 1. And it's another point on that line. If my line was not created, I would create 3 dots, just as I have right here, and connect them going with arrows in both directions. Now let's see if I put, or how it would change if I put a negative in front of that. Notice how that line creates that downward slope. That's what we talked about before. That negative is going to make it go down. So again, I'll start at my -1 as my y-intercept, and now I'm going to use my slope of -3 in order to create a new line. So that means I'm going to go down 1, 2, 3 spaces, and then right 1. Notice how I still go to the right, even though there's a negative in front of that 3. Again, to repeat, start at -1, and went down 1, 2, 3 squares, and then right 1. Last thing I would like to show you is how my line would change if there isn't a y-intercept there. The only thing that changes is that my y-intercept, since there's nothing there, goes at 0. 0 is another way to say nothing. So if you do not have a y-intercept, please make sure that you start at 0 on the y-axis. So now it's your turn. Using a piece of graph paper, please create an x and y axis that are labeled to 20 and -20. Please make sure you have equal distance in between each square. Then you're going to graph the following equations using a pencil. So there are 4 equations on here. You can choose to either graph them on the same piece of paper, or you can do it on 4 separate graphs. It does not matter to me. But please make sure you label which equation is which? So the first equation you're going to graph is y equals 3x plus 1. Then you're going to graph y equals 1/4 x minus 1. Then y equals negative 2x minus 2. And lastly, you're going to graph y equals negative 2/3 x. Use what you learned in the video in order to try to graph these equations. If you have any questions, please make sure that you write them down. When you are done graphing, please raise your hand and wait for further instructions. Good luck, I know you can do it.